She said, "I am too old for love." But the mountain man's response will break your heart, broken heart. The woman had always believed that life had given her more than she could carry. Her hair, streaked with silver, framed a face lined with years of laughter and sorrow. She moved through her days with a quiet grace, but behind her steady gaze was a heart that had learned to protect itself. Love, she told herself, was no longer meant for her. She had seen it come and go, leaving traces of pain behind. It was a luxury she could not afford. Her home was modest, tucked away at the edge of the mountain village. Surrounded by towering pines and rocky slopes, it felt like a world apart from the bustle of life below. Every morning she woke with the sun, letting its warm light spill across the wooden floors of her home. She tended to her garden first, carefully pruning the roses and watering the vegetables she had planted months before. Each plant, like herself, had endured seasons of struggle and bloom. She found solace in their quiet persistence. People in the village knew her as strong and independent. She was polite but distant, a woman who did not linger in gatherings or indulge in idle chatter. Children waved at her when she walked to the market, but she rarely spoke more than a smile or a nod. To them, she was a figure of calm authority, someone who moved through life without complaint, but also without revealing much of herself. Her mornings were often filled with small tasks. She prepared breakfast, cleaned the house, and then went about her daily errands. When she passed the small shops in the village square, she would exchange brief words with the shopkeepers, careful not to linger. Conversation about love or companionship never touched her. She had long since removed those topics from her life. Love, she reminded herself, was for the young or the foolish, but the mountains had a way of introducing unexpected encounters. One crisp morning, as she walked along a narrow path that wound through the forest, she noticed a figure moving ahead. He was tall, with broad shoulders and a strong frame, carrying himself with quiet confidence. His face was rugged, marked by years of life spent outdoors, and his eyes held a depth that seemed to see beyond the surface of people. This was the mountain man, someone the villagers spoke of with respect and a hint of awe. He was a solitary figure, yet there was a warmth in his demeanor that drew people in. The first encounter was brief. She had slipped on a patch of wet leaves, and before she could steady herself, he was there, steadying her with a firm hand. His voice was gentle, calm, and unexpectedly kind. "Are you all right?" he asked. There was no judgment in his tone, only concern. She nodded, brushing off the leaves and muttering a quick thanks. She had expected to feel embarrassed, but instead, there was something comforting in his presence, something that stirred a long-forgotten part of her heart. After that day, she noticed him more often. Sometimes he appeared while she was gathering firewood, other times while she wandered the trails with her thoughts. He never intruded, but he was there, always observing with quiet patience. At first, she resisted noticing him. She told herself that she had no room for companionship, that her life was complete on its own terms. Yet, a part of her could not deny the curiosity he sparked. The mountain man was different from anyone she had known. He did not rush into conversations or offer empty compliments. Instead, he listened. He watched with an attentive patience that made her feel seen without pressure. When he spoke, it was with honesty and simplicity. He shared stories of his life, days spent hunting, times alone in the mountains, moments of loss and joy. There was no pretense, no need to impress. His presence was steady, grounding, and strangely comforting. One afternoon, a sudden storm rolled in from the peaks above. Rain poured down in heavy sheets, and the woman found herself stranded on a trail, unsure of the path back. She began to panic, realizing how quickly the storm had darkened the forest. Just as fear started to grip her, he appeared through the downpour, carrying a large cloak. Wordlessly, he offered it to her, guiding her to a safe path. She could feel the warmth of his presence through the cold, the reassurance that someone was there to protect her. After that day, she began to notice the little things about him. The way he moved silently through the forest, the way he observed life with a careful eye, the way he seemed to understand people without needing them to explain themselves. She found herself thinking of him more often than she wanted, though she denied it openly. Love, she repeated to herself, was not for her. She was too old, too cautious, too guarded. But the mountain man had a way of slipping into her life without force. He left small gifts, wildflowers on her doorstep, a basket of fresh fruit from the forest, a carved piece of wood shaped like a bird. He did not expect thanks, and he never lingered. These gestures were quiet, unassuming, but they carried a weight of thoughtfulness and care that she could not ignore. The woman began to see the patterns of her own loneliness. She realized how much she had wrapped herself in routines, how carefully she had constructed walls to keep the world and love at a distance. And yet, in the presence of this man, she felt a warmth that was unfamiliar and unsettling. It was not a sudden, overwhelming attraction, but a slow, persistent awareness that perhaps, just perhaps, she could allow herself to feel again. One evening, she found herself walking along the ridge at sunset, the sky painted in shades of gold and pink. The mountain man was there, sitting on a fallen log, watching the horizon. She did not speak at first. They simply shared the silence, the soft whisper of the wind through the pines, and the distant call of a hawk. There was no need for words. In that quiet moment, she felt a connection that was both comforting and terrifying. She remembered the words she had repeated to herself for years. "I am too old for love." They were words of defense, meant to protect her from the vulnerability she had avoided all her life. But now, as she sat beside him, she realized that perhaps those words were no longer true. Perhaps love was not bound by age or circumstance, but by the willingness to open one's heart, even after years of caution. As the days turned into weeks, their encounters became more frequent, though always casual and unforced. She found herself looking forward to seeing him, a feeling that both surprised and frightened her. She tried to rationalize it, telling herself it was simply the comfort of friendship, the pleasure of companionship after so many solitary years. Yet deep down, she knew it was more than that. The mountain man never spoke of romance, never suggested that her feelings should change. He simply existed in her world, steady, reliable, and attentive. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, she began to lower her guard. She laughed more freely in his presence, shared stories of her past, and even admitted fears she had long kept hidden. He listened without judgment, offering gentle understanding rather than advice or solutions. One day, as they walked through the forest, she stumbled over a root and nearly fell. He caught her effortlessly, holding her steady against his chest. She looked up at him, her heart beating faster than she expected. For a moment, the world seemed to narrow down to just the two of them, standing in the shadow of ancient trees. She felt a surge of emotion that frightened her. She had thought she was done with such feelings, thought her heart had grown too cautious. Yet here it was, beating in a way she had not felt for decades. She quickly pulled away, embarrassed by the intensity of her own reaction. "I am too old for love," she said, half to herself, half to him, as if repeating the mantra would make it true. He smiled softly, not mocking her, not pressing her. He simply nodded, his eyes full of understanding. It was not a dismissal, but a quiet acknowledgement that he knew the truth of her words, and yet he did not let them define her. That night she sat by her window, looking out at the moonlit mountains. She thought of the mountain man and the calm certainty he brought into her life. She thought of the laughter they had shared, the quiet walks, and the unspoken understanding that seemed to pass between them. She realized that her heart, long guarded and hesitant, had begun to stir in ways she could not ignore. And so, her life began to shift in subtle ways. She found herself more aware of the world around her, noticing the small beauties she had overlooked. The sound of birds at dawn, the way the light danced on the leaves, the fragrance of wildflowers in the evening air. She began to anticipate the moments when she might see him, feeling a sense of warmth and anticipation that she had thought was impossible at her age. She did not yet allow herself to hope for love. That was still a dangerous thought, one she pushed away when it crept into her mind. But she could not deny the growing awareness that life, even at this stage, could offer unexpected connections, unexpected joys. Perhaps age was not a barrier. Perhaps the heart could still surprise her if only she allowed it. The mountain man remained a quiet presence, gentle and unwavering. He did not rush her, did not challenge her defenses. He existed in her life like a steady flame, illuminating corners of her heart that had long been shadowed. And though she told herself she was too old, though she tried to dismiss her growing feelings, she could not help but wonder if perhaps, just perhaps, the story of her life was not finished yet. The days grew longer, and with each sunrise, the woman found herself thinking of the mountain man more than she wanted. At first, she told herself it was only curiosity, a fleeting interest in the quiet man who lived among the pines and rocks. But soon, she could not deny the truth. His presence had begun to fill spaces she had long kept empty. Their meetings became more frequent, though always casual. He would appear while she gathered water from the stream, or she would find him tending to his small garden near the edge of the forest. Neither spoke of love, and neither tried to impose closeness. Yet each encounter carried a quiet intimacy, a comfort that neither had experienced in years. One afternoon, he invited her to help him repair a small shed on his property. She hesitated, unsure why she felt nervous at the thought, but eventually she agreed. They worked side by side, passing tools back and forth, exchanging small, friendly remarks. There was laughter, the kind that came easily without pretense. It was a simple day, filled with sun and the smell of pine, yet it stayed with her long after it ended. She noticed the way he watched the world around him, how he observed the patterns of birds, the changing light on the mountains, the way the wind shifted through the trees. There was a patience in him that she found both calming and inspiring. She realized that she had never truly noticed these details in her own life. With him, the world seemed larger, more alive. Evenings were spent in quiet companionship. Sometimes they shared a simple meal by a fire, the flames casting a warm glow on their faces. She found herself speaking more freely, sharing stories of her past, memories long tucked away. He listened without interruption, offering only gentle questions that encouraged her to go deeper. She was surprised by how easily she could open up to him, how safe she felt in his presence. Yet, even as her feelings grew, so did her fear. She reminded herself repeatedly that she was too old for love. What could a mountain man want with someone like her? She feared vulnerability, the risk of heartbreak, and the shame of allowing herself to feel again. Each time she sensed her heart stirring, she pulled back, retreating into the walls she had built over decades. The mountain man, however, never pushed. He respected her boundaries, moving slowly, carefully, as if he understood the fragility of her heart. His patience was a silent declaration of care, and though she resisted, she could not help but notice it. Small gestures, a shared smile, a hand offered in passing, a quiet word of encouragement began to chip away at her defenses. One rainy morning, she found herself caught in a sudden downpour while walking to the village. She ran for cover, but the rain was relentless. Just as she began to fear being drenched and chilled, she heard a familiar voice calling her name. He appeared, carrying a large cloak and a calm smile. Wordlessly, he wrapped it around her shoulders and guided her to shelter. She was embarrassed by how relieved she felt, how safe, how noticed. As they waited out the storm, sitting together under the shelter of an old wooden roof, she found herself observing him more closely. He was not young, and his body bore the marks of a life lived outdoors, in sun and wind, in labor and solitude. Yet there was strength in him, not just physical but quiet, steady strength of character. His hands were worn but careful, his eyes kind yet observant, and his smile, soft, patient, made her heart stir in ways she did not understand. Days passed into weeks, and the woman began to notice the little patterns of his kindness. He would leave baskets of fresh fruit at her doorstep, or small bundles of herbs tied neatly with string. Sometimes he carved simple wooden animals and placed them where she would find them: a fox, a bird, a tiny horse. They were thoughtful gestures, small but significant, and they made her heart feel lighter than it had in years. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the peaks, he invited her to walk with him along a trail she had never explored. The path wound through thick forest, over rocks, and along the edge of cliffs that overlooked the valley below. They walked in silence for a while, listening to the distant sound of a river and the soft rustling of leaves. Then he spoke softly without turning to her. "Do you ever feel that life has more to offer than we allow ourselves to see?" he asked. She considered the question, surprised by the depth of it. I'm not sure," she admitted. "I've always thought my time for new experiences, for love, has passed." He glanced at her, eyes thoughtful. "Love has no clock, no calendar. It comes when it will, and sometimes it surprises us in ways we never expect." She smiled, but it was a guarded smile, the kind that hides as much as it reveals. "I think you're speaking about a story I cannot be part of," he simply nodded. "Perhaps, or perhaps you are." The ambiguity of his words stayed with her long after the walk ended. She found herself replaying them in her mind, feeling an unfamiliar warmth. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to imagine a future that included someone else. Not just a friend, but a companion, someone who cared as deeply as he did. Yet the fear remained. Every time her heart began to open, She reminded herself of the rules she had lived by for decades. Love was for the young, for those willing to take risks, not for someone like her who had already endured loss and solitude. Still, she could not deny the small flutter of excitement whenever she knew he would appear. Their friendship grew slowly, carefully. He taught her small things about living in harmony with the mountains, how to track animals, how to identify plants, how to read the signs of changing weather. In return, she shared her knowledge of the village, the history she had gathered, the small joys and hardships of human life. Each exchange brought them closer, yet still, neither spoke directly of love. She began to notice how much she had missed human connection, not just conversation, but understanding, support, and quiet companionship. The mountain man embodied all of these things, and he did so without expectation or demand. It was a type of love she had not known, the gentle kind that grows slowly, patiently, and without force. One night they sat together by a small fire he had built near a stream. The moon reflected off the water, casting silver light across their faces. They spoke little, only exchanging stories of past hardships and small victories. She found herself laughing more freely than she had in decades, her voice carrying over the water. When she looked at him, she realized that he laughed too, a soft, genuine sound that seemed to echo the happiness she felt inside. The realization frightened her. She had told herself that her heart was no longer capable of such feelings, yet here it was, awakening, alive and tender. She pulled back slightly, reminding herself of the mantra she had repeated for so long. "I am too old for love." The words felt heavy, but also strangely comforting. They were a shield she could cling to while her heart wavered. Despite her resistance, she could not ignore the subtle signs of connection that grew between them. He noticed when she was quiet, when her eyes carried a hint of sadness. He remembered details she mentioned months before. He shared stories that reflected his own vulnerability. Slowly, she began to trust him, not fully, but enough to let him into her world in small ways. Their bond became a rhythm, a quiet dance of proximity and distance, of cautious trust and gentle affection. She looked forward to the simple moments, the shared meals, the walks through the forest, the long silences that felt meaningful. He did not rush her. He did not pressure her. He simply existed in her life as a constant presence, steady and unwavering. And then one day, a small accident changed everything. She had been carrying a basket of firewood down a steep path when she tripped. He was there in an instant, steadying her with strong arms. She felt the warmth of his body against hers, the steady beat of his heart, and the deep concern in his eyes. For a moment, the world seemed to shrink to just the two of them, suspended in a fragile bubble of care and attention. She pulled away quickly, embarrassed, and muttered the words she had repeated for decades. "I am too old for love." He smiled softly, not with mockery, not with dismissal, but with understanding. "Perhaps," he said quietly, "or perhaps it has only just begun." Those words lingered in her mind long after the incident. She could not shake the feeling that her life was opening in ways she had not expected, that perhaps there was still room for connection, for trust, for a kind of love she had believed was lost to her forever. As the weeks passed, the woman began to notice a change within herself. She laughed more easily, she spoke more freely, and she allowed herself to anticipate small joys. The mountain man's presence had become a quiet comfort, a reminder that life could still offer moments of happiness and tenderness, even at an age when she had believed all such things were behind her. And though she still repeated the words, "I am too old for love," she began to whisper them with doubt, with hesitation. Perhaps love did not belong only to the young. Perhaps it could appear in unexpected ways, and perhaps, just perhaps, her heart was capable of feeling again. The woman had begun to feel something she had not allowed herself to feel in decades. There was a warmth in her chest, a quiet excitement whenever she knew the mountain man would appear. She tried to deny it, telling herself that she was too old, that love was a story she had finished long ago. Yet, every shared smile, every gentle touch, every moment of quiet understanding chipped away at the walls she had built around her heart. One chilly morning, she awoke to a message from him, though he never sent notes lightly. A small bundle of fresh herbs lay on her doorstep, tied neatly with twine. Along with it was a note, written in his careful hand, "Meet me by the stream at sunrise. I want to show you something." She felt a mix of curiosity and nervousness. What could he possibly want to show her? Her heart beat faster than she expected. She dressed quickly, wrapped herself in a warm shawl, and hurried to the stream. When she arrived, he was already there, standing on the mossy bank, the golden light of sunrise glinting off the water. In his hands, he held a small wooden canoe, carved meticulously with intricate patterns. "I thought we could take it down the stream," he said softly, his eyes searching hers for a reaction. "It's peaceful, it's simple, just us and the water." She hesitated. The idea of venturing out with him alone felt dangerous, not in a physical sense, but emotionally. She could feel her walls trembling at the thought of closeness, of trust, of allowing herself to feel. I'm not sure," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. He smiled, gentle and patient. "You don't have to decide right now. We can just sit and watch the water." "That's enough." Reluctantly, she sat beside him, letting the wooden canoe float near the bank. The water was clear, reflecting the soft pinks and oranges of the sky. They watched in silence, listening to the gentle ripple of the stream and the occasional bird call. There was no need for words, yet she felt a profound connection growing in that quiet space. After a while, he spoke again. "You know," he said, "we spend so much of our lives worrying about the past or the future that we forget the present. Moments like this, they're what make life worth living." She looked at him, surprised by the depth of his words. "I've spent most of my life running from feeling, from hoping for more. And now," she trailed off, unsure of how to put her feelings into words. "Now," he prompted gently. "Now I feel," she admitted finally. "I feel something I thought I had lost forever." He reached out, not too close, just enough to brush her hand with his. The contact was electric in a subtle, almost imperceptible way. Her heart raced, and she quickly withdrew her hand, embarrassed by the sudden surge of emotion. "I am too old for love," she whispered, almost to herself. He smiled softly, eyes kind and understanding. "Perhaps, or perhaps it has only just begun." The words lingered in the air, heavier than the mist rising from the stream. She did not respond, but she could feel the truth in them. And in that silence, a fragile trust began to grow, a trust that she allowed herself to cling to despite the fear in her heart. Weeks passed, and their bond deepened. They spent more time together, learning about each other in ways that went beyond casual conversation. He shared stories of his youth, of times he had been alone in the mountains, of moments when he had felt both joy and sorrow. She listened, captivated by his honesty and vulnerability. She shared her own stories, tales of challenges faced and losses endured, and for the first time she spoke without fear of judgment. One evening, while walking along a rocky trail, the woman slipped and twisted her ankle. Pain shot through her leg, and she fell to the ground, unable to stand. Panic rose in her chest, but he was there instantly, steadying her and assessing the injury with calm precision. He gently lifted her, carrying her to a flat area where she could rest. "Don't try to stand," he said softly. "You're hurt, but you'll be fine. I'll take care of you." She looked up at him, her heart pounding, not just from pain, but from the intimacy of the moment. Here was someone who cared for her completely, without expectation, without judgment. She realized how deeply she had come to rely on him, how much his presence had begun to matter in her life. Over the next few days, he tended to her with quiet patience. He brought food, carried water, and helped her move around her home. She had always prided herself on independence, but she could not deny the comfort and safety she felt in his care. Slowly, she began to let herself rely on him, to allow herself to be vulnerable. One evening, while sitting by the fire in her home, she spoke hesitantly. "I've spent so long believing I was too old for love," she admitted. "I've built walls to protect myself, to avoid disappointment, and yet I find myself thinking of you constantly." He looked at her, eyes soft and full of understanding. "Love is not about age," he said. "It's about trust, connection, and courage. You've had courage all your life, even if you didn't see it. Now you have the chance to let your heart feel again." Tears welled in her eyes. She had spent years denying herself this possibility, yet here it was, offered gently and without demand. She realized that the fear of heartbreak had kept her from the joy she now glimpsed. And in that moment, she understood that vulnerability was not weakness. It was a doorway to something profoundly human and beautiful. The days that followed were filled with small, meaningful moments. They walked through the forest together, collecting herbs and wildflowers. They cooked simple meals, laughed at minor mistakes, and shared stories that revealed the depths of their experiences. Each moment was a thread, weaving a bond stronger than either had expected. Yet fear still lingered. She would sometimes retreat, reminding herself that she was too old, too cautious, too fragile. But he never pushed her. He offered patience, understanding, and quiet reassurance, proving that love could exist without pressure, without expectation, without haste. And slowly she began to trust him, not fully, but enough to let him into her life in meaningful ways. Then came a day that tested both their trust and her resolve. A sudden storm swept through the mountains, heavier than any in recent memory. The wind tore through the trees and rain battered the village with relentless force. She was caught outside, struggling to reach her home, and fear gripped her heart. She slipped, her ankle twisting once more, and panic rose, but he was there. As if sensing her danger, he appeared through the storm, carrying a lantern and moving with sure-footed confidence. Without hesitation, he lifted her into his arms and carried her to safety, shielding her from the rain and the wind. When they reached her home, she was trembling, not just from cold, but from the realization of how much she had come to rely on him. I don't know what I would have done," she whispered, tears mixing with raindrops on her cheeks. "You would have been fine," he said gently. "But I'm glad I was here, that's what matters." In that moment, the walls around her heart began to crumble. She realized that love was not about grand gestures or youthful passion. It was about presence, support, and unwavering care. She felt a deep, aching gratitude for his patience, his understanding, and the quiet, steady love he offered. That night, as the storm raged outside, they sat together by her fire. The warmth enveloped them, and she felt a profound sense of safety and connection. She realized that she had been holding herself back from love for fear of loss, but in his presence, she understood that the greatest risk was never to feel at all. Slowly, she began to speak of her hopes, her fears, and her regrets. He listened, never interrupting, never judging. And as she spoke, she felt her heart open in ways she had thought impossible. She understood that love could arrive at any stage of life, and that the heart was capable of renewal, no matter the years it had endured. In the days and weeks that followed, their bond grew stronger. They moved with a quiet rhythm, learning to navigate life together. Each shared sunrise, each gentle touch, each whispered word of understanding deepened their connection. And though she still repeated, "I am too old for love," the words lost their power. Slowly, hesitantly, she allowed herself to imagine a future filled with companionship, warmth, and shared joy. And in that quiet acceptance, she realized that the story of her life was not yet finished. The mountain man had shown her that love was not a fleeting chapter for the young, but a possibility for those willing to trust, to be vulnerable, and to open their hearts once more. The woman woke to the soft, golden light of dawn spilling across her kitchen. The quiet hum of the mountains filled the air, birds calling in greeting, the smell of dew and pine drifting in through the open window. She paused for a moment, savoring the calm, feeling a warmth in her chest she had not known for years. The mountain man had become a part of her mornings, her days, her life, and she no longer feared the feeling that had once terrified her. Over time, their companionship had grown into something deeper, something neither had rushed nor forced. They had learned to move together with gentle understanding, respecting boundaries while allowing trust to blossom. She laughed more freely now, sharing jokes, small stories, and even moments of clumsy vulnerability. In return, he met her openness with patient encouragement, a quiet strength that made her feel safe and cherished. One morning, as they walked along a trail she had once feared for its steep edges, she noticed the way the sunlight played on his face, highlighting the lines that told stories of his years in the mountains. She felt a surge of gratitude and admiration. "You've lived so fully," she said softly, almost to herself, "and yet you've found room in your heart for me." He smiled, a slow, gentle expression that seemed to carry the weight of years and wisdom. "We make room for those who matter," he replied, "and you matter." Her heart leapt at his words, and for the first time she did not shy away. She allowed herself to feel the connection fully, without fear or doubt. The walls she had built over decades were no longer needed. Love, she realized, was not about age or circumstance. It was about presence, care, and willingness to open one's heart. Their days were filled with simple joys. They worked together in the garden, tending plants and sharing the satisfaction of nurturing life. They hiked trails, exploring hidden corners of the mountains, discovering streams and rock formations they had never noticed before. Sometimes, they simply sat in silence, letting the world pass by around them, sharing a quiet intimacy that spoke louder than words ever could. Meals became moments of connection, small rituals that brought them closer. He would help her prepare vegetables from her garden, teaching her little tricks he had learned over the years, while she shared stories from her past, funny anecdotes, childhood memories, and lessons learned. They laughed together often, the sound of their joy echoing through the mountains, a music of companionship and warmth. One evening, after a long day of walking and collecting herbs, they sat on a large rock overlooking the valley. The sun dipped below the peaks, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. She leaned against him, feeling the steady rhythm of his breathing, the quiet assurance of his presence. "I never thought I'd feel this way again," she said softly, voice tinged with awe. "Feel what?" he asked, tilting his head to meet her gaze. "Alive," she admitted. "Connected, loved. I thought those days were behind me, that my heart had grown too tired to feel." He reached for her hand, holding it gently. "The heart doesn't grow tired of love," he said. "It only grows careful, and sometimes it takes time to find someone patient enough to let it open again. I am glad I found you." Tears filled her eyes, a mix of joy and relief. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to cry without shame, letting the emotions she had kept hidden flow freely. In his steady presence, she felt safe to be entirely herself, vulnerable, joyful, cautious, and daring all at once. The bond they shared became known to the villagers, though it was never forced or announced. Neighbors noticed the change in her laughter, her lighter steps, her renewed energy. They saw the gentle care he offered and the comfort she took in his presence. Some whispered, surprised that she, who had always been so guarded, had allowed herself to be seen in this way. Others smiled, inspired by the quiet, enduring love that had blossomed between them. One afternoon, she received an invitation to a village gathering. At first, she hesitated, remembering how she had avoided such events for years. But he encouraged her gently. "Let's go," he said. "You don't have to do anything except be yourself. I'll be there." At the gathering, people greeted her warmly, noticing the glow of happiness she carried. She moved with a new confidence, standing taller, smiling more freely. And through it all, the mountain man stayed by her side, not overshadowing her presence but supporting it with quiet strength. She realized that love was not about grand gestures or dramatic declarations. It was about shared life, steady support, and quiet joy. Evenings were often spent by the fire, their favorite spot in the little clearing near her home. They shared stories of the day, plans for small projects in the garden, and memories from years past. Sometimes they simply sat, letting the crackle of the flames and the scent of pine fill the space between them. In these moments, words were unnecessary. Their connection spoke through glances, gentle touches, and shared smiles. One particular night, the woman found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought her here. She thought of the years she had spent believing love was behind her, the decades of solitude she had endured, and the walls she had built to protect herself. And she realized how wrong she had been. Love had found her, not in grand, sweeping gestures, but in quiet, patient, unwavering presence. She felt a gratitude so deep it seemed to fill her entire being. The mountain man noticed her silence and reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "What are you thinking?" he asked softly. "I'm thinking that love is more beautiful than I ever imagined," she said. "And I am grateful that I allowed myself to feel it again." He smiled, his eyes reflecting the firelight and the warmth in her words. "You didn't just allow yourself," he said. "You made room for it. You opened your heart when it mattered most. That takes courage." In the weeks that followed, their love continued to grow, quietly, steadily, beautifully. They faced challenges, storms, chores, the small difficulties of daily life, but they faced them together, supporting and encouraging one another. Every day brought a new moment of joy, a new shared experience, a new reason to trust in the bond they had nurtured. They began to dream together, imagining small adventures and projects. Perhaps a new garden, a trail they could clear, or a small shelter by the stream for quiet mornings. Each plan was simple, but it was theirs, a reflection of the partnership that had grown from friendship into deep, abiding love. One evening, as the sun set over the mountains, she turned to him and smiled. "I used to say I was too old for love," she said, a laugh in her voice. "I was wrong. Love is not about age. It's about trust, patience, and care. And you have given me all of that." He took her hand in both of his, holding it gently but firmly. "And you have given me the same," he said. "Love is not about youth or grand gestures. It's about sharing life with someone who sees you, who values you, who is willing to walk beside you." That's what we have, and it's enough. It's more than enough. They sat together in the fading light, hands intertwined, hearts open, and souls connected. The mountains rose around them, timeless witnesses to their story, and the world felt at peace. In that quiet, simple, perfect moment, she realized that her life had not ended, that love had not passed her by. It had simply arrived when she was ready, when the time was right, and when the heart could embrace it fully. Days turned into months, and their love only deepened. The woman no longer felt the fear or hesitation that had once defined her. She moved through life with renewed energy, sharing laughter, conversation, and simple joys with the man who had patiently waited for her heart to open. And he, in turn, continued to offer kindness, support, and unwavering care, proving that love could be patient, enduring, and quietly powerful. In the end, the woman realized that love was not something to be rushed or forced. It was not about age or appearance or circumstance. It was about connection, trust, and willingness to be vulnerable. And she knew, with a certainty that filled her soul, that she had found something rare and beautiful, a love that could survive time, trials, and fear, and still grow stronger with each passing day. Together, they walked through the mountains, tending their garden, exploring hidden trails, sharing meals and stories, and sitting by the fire under the stars. They laughed, they cared, they dreamed, and they simply existed in each other's presence, finding joy in the quiet moments and strength in the shared journey. And in that simple, steady, enduring love, she finally understood that it was never too late to open one's heart. The mountain man had shown her that love could come at any age, that it could heal old wounds, and that it could create a life filled with warmth, trust, and happiness. She no longer whispered, "I am too old for love." Instead, she smiled, heart full, knowing that love had arrived exactly when it was meant to, and that it would remain as long as she and the man she loved walked together.